So good afternoon, everyone. It's an incredible pleasure for me to welcome you to one of our seminars this afternoon. Wherever you are, whether in Zimbabwe or other parts of the world, we really welcome you. And we just want to make a special welcome to Nick, who is our speaker this afternoon. And I just want to say today's talk is really special to our team in particular, because as you saw in the invitation, Nick will talk about securing the future of the painted wolf. And we put up this talk in honor of our dear colleague, Diane, who recently passed away, and Nick, her husband, they're working together on the painted wolf. And so we really are grateful that he's able to speak to us. But also would like to actually welcome Maggie, who is Dee's mom as well. Well, not where as well, but very close to Dee, and we just want to acknowledge you, Maggie, who is also on this call. So Nick will speak to us today, and so we're very grateful for that, and just want to welcome you. This is our team, but today, just want to say it's about Diane, who many of you know and have worked with, and I see a number of people, including Holly and many others that worked with Diane and knew her very well. And so we want to honor and celebrate her this afternoon. Just some quick updates about our team. If you're interested in being a friend or a member of our chapter, please do sign up. We also would like to really encourage many of you to join as members of the Society for Conservation Biology. And we've got a number of projects that we're running. The resource library that Dee was really pushing very hard, and we hope we will be able to complete that project. We are thinking of a horizon scan. When we get the money, we'll do that. And then we've got a blog and a seminar series that you already, many of you know about. So that's a bit about what we do and the chapter. If you've got a blog, please do contact Tim, who's on this call as well, on the email, and we will organize for your blog to be put up on our website. It could be a blog about a conservation issue or something else, or an idea, a story. Would be happy to do all those. At this juncture, I just wanted to give an opportunity to one of our colleagues, Nobesutu, just to talk about Dee just for 2 minutes or so. And Dee was a friend to many of us, but when she joined the team, Nobesutu was really the link to her joining, and just wonderful introduction, because they had worked together before. And so it's an incredible privilege just to be able to give her an opportunity to say one or two things, and then we'll ask Nick to do the talk, and then we will move on. Okay, so Nobesutu, if you could just, if you can, come through, put your camera, and say a few words about the.
Sorry, MX. Nobesutu's just messaged me. Understandably having connection problems, as is often the case with people connecting from Zim. She should be connecting any moment now. So
Okay.
sorry about that.
No, that's fine. So what we will do then is, I think we'll hand over to you, Nick. Oh, I think Nobesutu is just joining. I've just seen her joining. Yeah, she should be joining now. Okay, one moment. Are you there, Nobesutu?
Yes, I am now.
Okay, all right. Welcome, and just want to give you just a few minutes, just 1 or 2 minutes, just to say 1 or 2 things about D, and then we will hand over to Nick for the presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, and my apologies for the delay. I was having power challenges, but I'm glad that I'm connected now. Had it been Dyer, I think she would have already done this. She was so efficient and energetic and just got everything done quickly and smoothly. It was just amazing. And it's quite an honor for me to be here before you to talk about Dyer. Well, I could never be able to describe the type of person she was, and I could never be able to measure her contributions to conservation. She was such an extraordinary conservationist in that I first met Dyer in 2016 at Manapos National Park, where she did enormous work working with practitioners as well as with parks as well in terms of conservation. She had so much energy, knowledge, and zeal to work and push things and get things done. I remember the first elephant meeting that I attended with parks, she's the one who had facilitated. The meeting was just extraordinary. The efficiency and the competence that came with the way she did her things and arranged everything, it was just extraordinary. And for me, from that time, since 2016, she sort of became my to-go person in terms of conservation issues and issues with Manapos, to do with Manapos National Park, because then I was the ecologist there before I moved to Wange. Later on, I became the elephant coordinator for Zim Parks. And at that time, she had actually worked with the African Elephant Specialist Group, and she actually introduced me to the specialist group. And we actually did engage and talk a lot about elephant conservation in the country and a whole lot of things. And then later on, she joined the SCP chapter, and it was just amazing working with her as our treasurer. And I mean, you can come to think of it, work with the SCP is all voluntary, and we all put aside time to actually work and to ensure that the chapter moves forward. But with Dyer, sometimes it feel like, you know, she's focusing and doing a lot for the chapter, and the things that she did for the chapter. If you look at our library, she's the one who created and got that up and running. And at the same time, she was doing a whole lot of work, including work on the Painted Wool Foundation as well, which Nick is going to be talking about today. Yes, so I met Nick and Diane separately, and Nick also is actually a friend of mine, and one of the most passionate people I actually know, and especially when it comes to painted dogs. And I'm really glad that today he's here and he's going to be talking about this in honor of Diane. And what's actually more interesting for me about this is he's giving it on this platform with the SCB, one of the last work that she dedicated her life to, and also to the Painted Wool Foundation, which she put so much energy and work into, and we're about to hear about today. We're going to hear about today. Yeah, so without taking much time, I think I'll hand over to you, MX, and thank you so much for this opportunity. And yes, I look forward to your talk, Nick. And thank you for taking time to give this. Thanks.
Thanks, Nobesuthu. I am sure there will be lots other people, who can say the many achievements that Diane had over a short space of her life. And Holly there just says that rings so true of Diane, and a ball of energy, zeal, knowledge, passion, and just a plain good human being. And so we're very grateful for her. So let's celebrate her life and ask Nick at this point to talk about Painted Wolves, which is one of the last big projects that Diane did. And so Nick, it's an incredible pleasure to have you speak to us this afternoon. The floor is yours. And by the way, Nick is a well-acclaimed photographer, so you will see lots and lots of good photographs this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Em, and thank you very much, Nobesuthu. That was a very lovely tribute to Dyer. Clearly, it's been a real shock to all of us. Today, I want to talk to you about painted wolves, wild dogs, African wild dogs, painted dogs. They've got lots of names, even Cape hunting dogs. But I think the first thing I'd like to do is to really just talk to you a bit about Dyer. One thing that she was really committed to was SEB. She got cancer back in 2019, and a lot of her commitment she pulled back on. But one she told me that she refused to give up was her commitment to SEB. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed working with you all. It was extremely important to her. She was proud of everyone who was part of that, proud to be part of it as a conservationist, but also very proud of it to be part of it as a Zimbabwean. So thank you, because it was important work for her. So having yes.
If you could put it in slide view.
So how's it coming?
It's coming like it would be for you as the presenter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know what's coming?
Yes, that's better. That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of a background about me, is that I haven't always been a photographer. I haven't always been in conservation. For a large part of my life, I was working in the City of London, although I did grow up in Kenya and left there in my late teens. And it was only in 2011 that I decided I'd had enough of the UK and wanted to return to Kenya. And I bought a Land Cruiser in Kenya and decided that photography and wildlife was a real passion of mine. And so I spent the next several years traversing up and down southern and eastern Africa. And that's just part of the trips that I did. Just taken from my GPS. And I wasn't only visiting national parks and taking photographs, but I was equally fascinated by the issues surrounding them. So spending time with conservationists, but also spending a lot of time, staying a lot of weeks, sometimes even months, with various communities that actually have to live alongside the wildlife. And really trying to understand their perspective and how it actually affects them, because it became increasingly clear to me that the real challenges that wildlife faces surrounds the wildlife, human-wildlife potential conflicts, and all the issues surrounded that. And that allowed me to learn quite a lot, but at the same time, become passionate about photography and passionate about wildlife. It was only in 2013 that I actually first came to Zimbabwe. And where I came was, the first place I arrived was in Manapools, which to me has become my second home, but also, I believe, one of the most beautiful places on earth. Having visited so many parks, I really wanted to get to know one intimately, not only the area and the land and so on and so forth, but also the animals, to get to know them as rather than just there's an elephant, but actually to be able to identify individual herds and individual creatures. The other thing as a photographer that is pretty unique to Manapools is that it allows you, it's the only park in Africa, in fact, that allows you to walk there on foot by yourself. And after a lot of help and support from guides, who are really probably without a doubt the best in Africa, they taught me a lot about walking in the bush alone, and how to be safe and how not to interfere with animals. And as a photographer, to be able to take pictures of animals on foot, you get unique perspectives, not only from the fact that you're able to get unique angles of animals that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get when you're in a vehicle, but also when you're on foot, the animal knows you're there. And so therefore you have to be deeply sensitive to that animal and understand that, that it's their space that you're in. And, they sometimes do come up to you, but at the same time, what that allows is for me as a photographer, to get a very deep connection with the creature. Because if you're in a game viewer, all the animal will see is a metal vehicle and not identify with the human in front of them. It was pretty much, I was very lucky that in 2013, I spotted the wild dogs running on a hunt, and I pointed it out to a Zimbabwean guide who very generously said, why don't you come with me and follow them on the hunt with my guests? And I did that, and it was the most incredible experience that I'd ever had. And it started off, that one incident of watching them hunt started off what has now become nearly 10 years of following them and passionately trying to do whatever is in my power to sorry, not a good time. Yeah, whatever is in my power to actually save them, because they are incredibly threatened. But before talking about, the threats that they are under and so forth, what I'd really like to do is to just spend a little time that I have with you to tell you about what I see as special about the wild dogs, share with you some of the photographs that I've taken of them, and explain some of their characteristics and what to me makes them so incredibly special. So I think most of you have come across wild dogs before. What is so special with them is that each one is an individual, each one is unique. And what I mean by that is that it's not just that their coat patterns are all individual and you can identify them by their coats, but so are their personalities. And although this to most of you here will just be a wild dog, but to me, this is Triss. This is Triss, who was daughter of Blacktip. She was one of the chief babysitters and continually spent her time around the den looking after the various litters of the pups. She has since passed. I haven't seen her for years, but to me, most of the dogs that you'll see in the pictures today are individuals that I knew by name, and most of them knew by sight. So what can I tell you about the dogs? They are, first of all, they are not solitary creatures. They live in packs. Packs can be simply an alpha female and an alpha male. So a breeding pair effectively, but they also can be packs of 50 plus. It's less common these days to see them in such sizes, but in Lower Zambezi National Park, there's a pack of nearly 40 dogs that are successfully moving around that park. Although in Zimbabwe, packs of that size are very rare, and are usually between 10 and 20, or even less. The other thing to actually say is that those packs are incredibly social, and they will sleep most of the day in the shade, but in the morning and at the very evening when they wake up, they perform something which is a greeting ceremony, which is a bonding session where it is the most beautiful thing to experience, because they're sitting all quiet, just lying on top of each other, and suddenly they shoot up alive and just play with each other and run and chase and bite and do everything. Some people think when they see that the first time that they are having a massive fight, but the reality is that they're just having an enormous amount of fun. And I think that is what really, to me, is the most wonderful thing about the wild dogs, is that they seem to be a lot like, you know, your pet dogs. They seem to be having an enormous, you know, just absolutely tearing around and enjoying themselves just for the pleasure of being with each other. One important thing that I will actually add here is that even though their characteristics are like dogs, they are not dogs. They are a separate genus called Lycaon, whereas dogs, wolves, jackals, Ethiopian wolves are all in a different genus of Canis. So I know Peter Blinston likes to say and tell me that they are as close to a domestic dog or a wolf as they are to, as I am to a baboon. And I know many people may say that's quite close, but the reality is that you cannot breed a wild dog with a domestic dog or a wolf. And on that subject, the reason we call them painted wolves was really because, well, there are a number of reasons, but two important reasons why we did. One is that it is actually their scientific name, Lycaon pictus, actually translates roughly as painted wolf-like. And the other reason, a more important reason, is that the BBC, under David Attenborough, when they were producing the Dynasties film, wanted to call them painted wolves. And indeed, David Attenborough said, behind me, this is in the Chirui River, behind me is the Cape hunting dog, as the painted wolves that used to be called the Cape hunting dogs. So we created a foundation and renamed the book so that when the billion people who saw Dynasties actually Googled painted wolf, they actually found something to do with conservation. And that's the origin. But as I like to tell everyone, we are definitely not dogmatic as to what we actually call them. Painted dogs, wild dogs, painted wolves. The important thing is how we save them. Moving on to probably their most famous characteristic is how they hunt. And they are probably Africa's most efficient predator. But that is not to be confused with the fact that they are not wanton killers. They have an appalling reputation, but as you can see in their this photograph, they are quite happy to sleep with their prey. They hunt in the morning and they hunt in the evening, and they don't plunder an impala herd. They are generally nomadic, except when they are denning, and they move vast distances, moving from herd to herd. And those distances can be anything from 200 square kilometers, and in the Kalahari even reach 1,500. So they are kind of, although they've got a reputation for wanting to kill everything, they are in fact, conservationists, in as much as they don't generally plunder a herd. However, having said that, perhaps one of the greatest joys to experience is to actually see them on the hunt. They can stalk and get very close to a herd of impalas, or whatever they eat. In each different area, they'll choose to eat different things. In mana pools, impala is their predominant prey, whereas in Wangi, you will find that it's kudu, and in say Laikipia in Kenya, it's actually dik-dik, and in Senegal, the last surviving packs in near Kolakoba, in West Africa, their main prey seems to be warthogs. So they have a varied diet, but each area seems to have a predominant prey preference, depending upon, I guess, the abundance of prey. The other important thing to understand about them is that they are, what is their efficiency? So people say that 80% of their hunts result in kills, which compares to 20–30% for lion, I believe. And to me, that might be high. I've often seen a lot of failed hunts, but generally there's not very many days when the pups and the dogs go hungry. They are incredibly fast. When the BBC were filming them in a helicopter, they reckoned that the dogs that were on the chase behind some impalas were exceeding 70 kilometers an hour, which rivals, because the helicopter was going backwards at that speed. So that's not particularly scientific measurement, but they believe that those are the speeds they're reaching, which certainly rivals and exceeds a cheetah. But that wasn't a scientific measurement. As I said, the kills are usually efficient, often done with 3 or more dogs, and they generally kill their prey by disemboweling them. The issue is it looks rather horrendous because they rip the animal apart, but in reality, I've witnessed several kills, and the longest it's taken for the animal to survive has been about 8 seconds, and that's how efficient they are. In fact, this picture was taken at Chisasiku pool in Mana Pools, and the poor impala thought its fate was would have been better if it jumped in the pool, which it did, and much to the upset of the wild dogs, it lasted about 2 seconds until it was surrounded by crocodiles, and the dogs looked on, rather miffed that they had missed their breakfast. The other thing about wild dogs is that they are incredibly, that they always surprise you. So there's lots of scientific papers that say they do this, they don't do that, or whatever. And then they seem to do it to confound the scientists. One thing that was definite was that they would never eat primates. But when I was in Mana Pools, there were 2 packs that actually turned up that learnt to predate on baboons, which this started in about 2015. And then suddenly during 2016 was the predominant prey source for wild dogs on the Mana Pools floodplain. They're doing it less and less now. It seems like the skill has drifted back, but but one of the reasons we think that is that the baboons were first of all incredibly shocked to be attacked by a pack of wild dogs, and gradually they learnt how to respond, and they started to fight back, and we were beginning to see dogs with pretty severe injuries caused by baboon bites, we suspected. The other thing about wild dogs is the pups. They love to play with the food and the afters, which is actually a lot of fun. And this picture that I took in 2016 after a baboon hunt, I'd walked 2 kilometers following them on the hunt. They killed a baboon, and then the dogs let the pups eat the baboon because there wasn't enough to go around for the whole pack. And then I just lay on the ground photographing them, and they were having the pups were having the most fun playing with a baboon's head. It was like the most amazing game of rugby you had ever seen. And I stayed there for about half an hour, and I took this shot, which I was very fortunate that it actually was that it became one of the award-winning photographs of the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition in London. There's another picture. I've got so many of these shots, and they're all pretty wonderful. But there's this picture that I took. So just if you've got a weak stomach, look away. But I call this picture "Keep Smiling Whatever Happens." Again, it was part of the series that I took photographing the wild dogs. The other thing is that I mentioned just now that the wild dogs would let their pups eat first. And I think this is one of the very special things about them, is that they compete with submission as opposed to with aggression. If you think of a pride of lion, you'll have the male eat the lion, the buffalo or whatever it's killed until it's about to burst, whereas the wild dogs, and then the females will have a go, and then the cubs eat last. Here it's reversed with wild dogs. They will let the pups eat first, and then, as in this case, the dog on the right is Gianni. He was injured, and another dog, I think that's actually Tris, came along and said, "You better have something to eat." So they do share. They do not compete aggressively. Another delight is actually observing them with their pups, and this really begins in the den. So after gestation period of around 70 to 71 days, the alpha female will go into a hole, perhaps an old porcupine hole or aardvark hole, and have her pups, which are born blind, and then wean off the mother for about a month. And then very slowly but surely they will start to emerge from the den. And this is kind of what they look like when they're about a month old. I wouldn't never go to the den before a month because they are very, it's a very, very sensitive time for them. In fact, we've just had a big tragedy in Manor Pools the last week, which we're still investigating, but a lot of pups have just died, which is a bit of a tragedy. But the important thing is that about the dogs when they come out the den is that they are cared for not just by the alpha female, who is the only one who breeds and the only one who's given birth to her, but also by the rest of the pack. And when you stay there for the 3 months that they're in the den and actually watch them day by day, they're given a little more latitude, they're giving a little more instruction, and the whole pack spends their time teaching them, making them fight for food, moving them onto solids, taking them for little walks. It's really quite a special experience to actually see. And then after 3 months, they go to their normal lifestyle, which is nomadic. And I think if ever you're going to see wild dogs, if you want, and try and time it so just after they've left the den, because that is probably the funnest time to see them. You have all the pups want to do is play, and they are really quite hilarious. They run around chasing each other, annoying the adults, and they gradually, become more and more confident as time goes by. And what is fun when they get up to actually have fun and play, it doesn't take long before the adults want to join in, and you'll find the whole pack. And there's 4 pups lying down trying to get some sleep, and they're exhausted by the adults. That's what the BBC called Pip, because she was collared, but her name's Taku, and she just absolutely loved playing with the dogs continuously, even to the exhaustion of the pups. And being able to see them in this environment is probably the most special that you can enjoy. And one of the other delights of the dogs is that it's led by an alpha female. The whole pack, it's a matriarchal society. This is Blacktip, made famous by the BBC, and that is one of the. They are one of the most, absolutely, just amazing societies that you can actually sit and observe. For me. So, but that hopefully gives you a little flavor of basically this, what to me is Africa's most incredible creature. But they are threatened. So what I'd like to talk to you a little now is the threats that they face, and basically what we believe can be done to actually save them. So let's just talk a little bit about their history. If we go back 100 years or so, we estimate that perhaps across Africa and the entire Africa, sub-Saharan, avoiding the Congo because of the dense forests, there were perhaps 500,000 wild dogs in existence. Today, we are looking at them just spread across in a few countries. And the estimated number is probably around 6,500 wild dogs left. They obviously face natural predators. So hyenas are a large threat to them, especially their pups. They come to steal their food. The dogs are good at repelling them, but quite frequently they do get, the hyenas will take a pup, and I've seen that happen in front of me, and it's not very nice. But interestingly, the wild dogs, although they've probably got the capability, especially in their numbers, never seem to kill the hyenas. The other thing about them is the other threat that they face, a lion. This is the dogs, the lions, when they see dogs, they generally attack them. I was in Kanga on Sunday. We had darted a dog with Peter, and then we were waiting them. We left them and they went to sleep, and then we were waiting for them to come down to the waterhole to drink, which they duly did, and then 6 lions charged in and killed one of them. I'm not quite sure. It's very tragic when you actually see that. The lions don't seem to have any benefit from doing it, and the dogs ran away and they just sat down and had a good drink. But it is a bit of a tragedy when you see packs diminished by lion attacks. But to be honest, lions, hyenas, yes, that's all natural and that's fine, but that has not caused their massive decline. What's really caused their decline is us, unfortunately. And I just show you this here. I got this from Zimbabwe, or I didn't get it. I'm not allowed in there because I'm not Zimbabwean, but Dyer went into the National Archives and she found this, which is the reward for the destruction of wild dogs, which was issued in 1916. effectively because of the belief that they were wanton killers and that they would kill livestock, cattle, virtually everything. This is the magistrate or justice of the peace of Zimbabwe, or the government of Zimbabwe in 1916 offered 5 shillings for anyone who killed a wild dog. And this practice was carried out across most of Africa. And in Zimbabwe, it continued until 1978. I haven't had it confirmed, but I've been told from several sources that in Kruger, during the 30s, you were actually allowed to visit there, and the only animal you could actually shoot as a visitor was a wild dog. Basically, the journals, if you go into the archives, are full of stories which tell you how to kill a wild dog, whether it's with cyanide, whether it's with capturing the pups and waiting for the dogs to come back and shoot them, whether it's trying to run over them in a car. It's all the farming journals are just completely full of how to kill wild dogs, which kind of puts in perspective of all the issues we have today. But I mean, the impact of this has actually been to reduce their numbers significantly. And now they are a protected species, but they still are under severe threats. Their main threats are, when they live around the communal areas, are snaring. Not that people want to snare the wild dogs necessarily, but they are a bycatch of snares aimed at catching bucks for the bushmeat trade, or even just for people to try and feed their families. Other threats are roadkills. This is significant, threatens particular areas, as well as disease such as rabies and distemper, which they catch off domestic dogs, and whole packs can easily be decimated. So I think the awareness of the threat that they're under, and the fact that their numbers still appear to be in decline, and the fascination of the species, I was beginning to learn. And then I met a guy who also lives in Zimbabwe, called Peter Blinston, who runs painted dog conservation in Wangi and is also responsible for the dogs in Mana Pools. We met briefly in Wangi, and then I helped him find a pack, which took about 9 days in Mana Pools back in 2014. And during that time, we became good friends, and we decided to write a book together. And so but what we agreed in at the time was that neither of us really wanted to profit from the book, but really we wanted to produce the best thing we possibly could, using my photographs and our combined experiences, and really try and use that to explain more about this incredible creature, but also to raise money and funds for the wild dogs. Along the way, in 2016, I met another incredible creature, and that was Diane Skinner. We were soon in a relationship, and while Peter and I were working on the Wild Dog Project, and we asked her if she would be good enough to help us form a foundation for the protection of the wild dogs. And she very kindly, and would she be a founding trustee? And she very kindly told me and Peter that, given the fact that she's intellectually and emotionally more mature than both of us combined, that she would gladly help us to do what we can do. So it was with great delight that we had her expertise and her knowledge to actually form the Painted Wolf Foundation. And initially, the Painted Wolf Foundation was designed with 3 things in mind. One was to raise awareness of the species, and the other was to support organizations on the ground so that we can encourage best practice and try and increase the numbers of wild dogs. So this we were doing and selling the book and so on and so forth, and that was working. And then we were going to use the proceeds of the book to convene a meeting in Johannesburg at the beginning of 2020, with the participants being all the people involved in wild dog conservation. That was obviously scuppered with COVID. So what we asked Dyer to do was to resign as a trustee and become our executive director and consult with the entire wild dog conservation network to try and determine what can be done to try and make a transformational change for the species. This was published in a report that we published at the beginning of the year. And it's about 150 pages, something like that. And it really gives a deep insight into the status of conservation for the painted wolves. We analyzed where there's gaps and what the needs are. And we developed a theory of change to try and reverse their downward trajectory. And we did that. It was myself, Peter, and Dyer, but also we had the help of Paul Thompson of WCN and Dr. Peter Lindsay, who I think is on this call, or he was, unless he's fallen asleep, and Marcus Hoffmeyer, who also helped us. And this was an enormous amount of work conducted by Dyer. She had several meetings with all 37 experts across Africa, really trying to get granular on the 23 field organizations and the umbrella organizations that also are involved in supporting the wild dogs. It took most of the year to actually put together, and it came up with I mean, these are basically all the some of the organizations that we actually spoke with right across Africa. And we came up with actually some quite interesting findings. One is that, I mean, those are the areas where the wild dogs organizations exist. The species is in decline in most areas where you can get a handle on it. And it's stable and improving only where there's well-funded and focused conservation organizations that are involved in wild dog conservation. It also, I think they were, the people we spoke to were very honest, and they acknowledged huge knowledge gaps. And we also identified that where there was no effective land management, that the prospects for wild dogs are very much diminished. So, what this did show was that this very important indicator species was still in decline. The conservation, so what we did analyze was, what's being done to save them. And there's 8 widely recognized interventions to tackle the direct threats, from monitoring and research, engaging with communities, increasing awareness, managing habitat, rehabilitating injured dogs, education programs to young and older people, and also on the ground anti-poaching measures. But we also found quite a lot of other factors that were not widely recognized. This would include significant funding constraints. And there's 2 ways that we would say that. One, we estimated when we analyzed the budgets available to wild conservation, probably doesn't amount more than $2 million a year. But more than that, the burden of raising funds on the organization is significant. Another issue is there's there are significant knowledge gaps, and we took the view that if you don't know much about the dogs, it's very, in certain areas, it's very hard to actually save them. There is also quite a strong focus on science on the species, rather than perhaps more productive areas such as land and communities. The organizations involved really, do not have any mechanisms to collaborate or talk to each other and share their best practice. There's definitely a very big lack of capacity and diversity in the wild dog conservation community. And there's the broader issues of the fact that these animals continue to have a very poor image, not just in the wider world, where most people don't know they exist, but equally among communities and among the people who actually have to live with them. And what's really been is any strategy, coherent strategy for a species-wide recovery. So you've got some of these excellent organizations working in small areas, not able to, but not communicating with each other, and there's no broad, wide strategy that will actually make a difference. So at this point, and at the beginning of last year, we contacted the WCN, the Wildlife Conservation Network, which is an incredible organization based in San Francisco. And they have launched, as well as many other things, but briefly here, they have launched 4 funds: Elephant Crisis Fund, Lion Recovery Fund, run by Peter, who's here, Pangolin Crisis Fund, and Rhino Recovery Fund. And they have actually raised significant amounts of money, I think over 60 million in the last 10 years, really to analyze and support organizations that are really making a difference in the field. And it's this that we have been engaging with WCN to try and create a similar fund for the dogs. And they've also helped us in actually honing in on what to create a strategy that would be transformational for the species and develop a theory of change, which we hope will actually double their numbers in 30 years. And what I'll do is I'll just very, very briefly sort of like run through that. But our goal is to secure the future of the painted wolf. Our mission is to try and support, expand, and optimize painted wolf conservation everywhere, not just in a few areas. Really, if you want to make a difference, you've got to actually do it everywhere. And we've set ourselves a goal of double their numbers in 3 decades. So this will be achieved by effectively following 3 strategic pillars. That is protecting the painted wolves, recovering territory, and supporting collaborations. So to explain those and expand on those just briefly, protecting the painted wolves, what we're really talking of there are existing rangelands where the painted wolf either exists, some are thriving, some are really struggling. Some of the areas have excellent conservation organizations looking after them. Others have absolutely nothing. So our idea here is there are proven painted wolf conservation measures that have been seen to work and stabilize and even increase populations. And what we are trying to do here is to see how, to secure enough funds so that you can have organizations in every area where there's wild dogs to actually try and increase the population. If we did that, we suspect you could probably increase current numbers by maybe 20%. But that's not going to double them. So our second pillar to our strategy is to recover territory. And this is actually quite a critical part of our strategy. They have got a lot of former rangelands, and now there are organizations like African Parks who are taking over the management of wildlife areas, which are pretty depleted, and re-establishing them with the full engagement of communities. And I think this is really the great hope for the wild dog is, can we find enough territory to actually start relocating packs? And we're currently working with EWT, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, who have successfully relocated wild dogs into Gorongosa in Mozambique, into Malawi, and into Liwa Plains in Zambia. And these are good reintroductions, and especially Gorongosa have been incredibly successful. And if you look at a 30-year time horizon, if we can identify and develop a pipeline where we can establish wild dogs and prepare the land for them, then this gives them a huge amounts of hope. The other area that we're really trying to look at is to support collaboration. I come from a business background, and to be able to get organizations working together where you can share ideas, achieve economies of scale. I think there is a lot of dividends to actually come from that sort of investment. And we're looking at how do we get different organizations to not only learn from each other, but also to collaborate in broader rangelands, especially where connectivity is such an issue. So that gives you a broad outline, a basic outline of where we are. It's been a journey. Dyer was an enormous driving force of this journey. She did the consultation. We've all worked on this partnership between us and WCN. We have in place a very robust concept and strategy in this report. If anyone would like a copy, I can get that to them. Please just email me. We've got dialogue with all the field organizations, and we've also identified some initial projects to support. Just very briefly, I'll run through three of them. So I visited Kenya, where I grew up in and spent time in around the Mara and around in the southern Rift Valley on the Tanzanian border. And what's apparent there, and what we all know, but the Maasai, if they see a wild dog, they will actually kill them. What's actually interesting is the myths that the Maasai have about the wild dogs. So they believe one thing. I mean, I think I might have mentioned they've never ever killed a human being. It's not been recorded. Not a dog in the wild has never done that. But the Maasai around the Mara have a confirmed belief that if a wild dog sees them, it will definitely attack them and kill them. Whereas the Maasai in the Rift Valley believe they'll never kill a human being. But they all believe that they might attack, and that the only way to save yourself from them is to actually rub yourself on the ground in the most dirtiest, smelliest piece of ground you can find, because they believe that a wild dog will never eat dirty meat. And I think what you actually realize when you spend a lot of time, with the Maasai, that they have built up this mythology of this creature, and breaking down those views is really the only way that we're actually going to be able to reintroduce wild dogs back across the Maasai areas, and even to the point that I spoke to rangers in the Masai Mara, and when they do find the wild dogs, they chase them out the park because they believe they're going to deplete all the prey. So there's a lot of myths, and it's a fertile ground to take a very long-term project to start changing attitudes to the wild dogs in that area. Another area we're working in, where Dyer and I visited just probably back in May, is working in the southern Kalahari, above the Kalahari Game Reserve, where you've got the opposite situation. You've got 20,000 kilometers of almost empty space. Only 3,000 people actually live there. And at the moment, they are relatively, their impact on the wild dogs is not particularly It's not massively hostile, but what we need to do is develop incentives for wild dogs to accept them in the area. You do it now before that area becomes totally, you invest there now before that area becomes totally hostile towards the wildlife that's actually living around there, especially the dogs. And then another area we're working, I mentioned the reintroductions being important. A lot of reintroductions, or a number of reintroductions, have been done, some successful, some unsuccessful. EWT are probably at the leading edge of that. And what we're trying to do is to build and help them or fund them to build a model for reintroduction success. And then develop the pipeline so that all what is being done, all the reintroductions, we can actually look at that, what went wrong, what went right, and then hopefully as the years pass, we get better and better at doing it. So I think that gives you a rough idea of basically what I was doing, what Dyer was doing. And I will sort of end up just now, but what I would say is that just spending my time with these creatures has just been just an incredible privilege to actually get to know them, and understand why they are so worth saving. Equally, this experience has led me to two very special people. One who sadly is no longer with us, but effectively, you know, they both recognize the importance of this creature. You know, the fact that it's an indicator status, you know, that shows a healthy ecosystem is just one of them. So what I'll just say to end it up, you know, I hope that a few things I've said today, you'll feel that these creatures are worth saving. Perhaps you've learnt something about them. And for me now, more than ever, having lost Dyer, you know, I just want to make sure that her legacy lives on for all the work that she's done for the last 4 years. So I know you found her special, so did I. And she loved working with you, as I did. And I think, you know, perhaps we can all see her passing as motivation to continue the work she did and continue our own work. But thank you very much indeed.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nick, for that wonderful presentation and the photos. And I think that ending of your presentation was just perfect. Feels odd to come back on the back of that. But before we close, we just wanted to get 1 or 2 questions. Please do feel free to put any questions on the chat. Would like to take 1 or 2 questions before we close. And one I would probably pose, Nick, to you is, I think the fund idea is brilliant. I think it brings your business skills into a sector that, you know, for many of us that have worked in this sector, funding is always a limitation, and the gap between what's needed and what we have has been huge and continues to be. What's the target for that, and how is the fund managed? How do you envisage it being managed going into the future? What's the role of the countries, range countries in the fund?
So at the moment, our goal is simple, which is to raise as much money as we can. WCN has set us a target to actually raise $1 million to be able to launch the fund. We've raised about a quarter of that and are now spending that. But it's been early days. What we wanted to do was to find 4 good projects to actually invest in, so that we can demonstrate, what we're actually, where we're actually going. And then once we have that, and we have stable funding for a period of a year or so, we'll be able to launch the fund in full, in very publicly, especially in the US, where most of the funds actually exist. The Lion Recovery, and these funds are incredibly powerful. For those who work with the Elephant Crisis Fund, Lion Recovery Fund, they are able to actually raise millions. So we need to be able to do this for the wild dogs.
Brilliant, brilliant. Just one or two questions. Given the recognized, thank you, Raoul, for that question, need for regaining territory, building collaboration, is an effort being made to overlay the maps of conservation effort that's being not just species by species basis, but an overlap of flagship, indicator, charismatic. I think the question is both a question and a suggestion. I think this is, to overlay all these and create synergies between the different species that are there. So keep that in mind, and I'll read the second one, and then you can make a comment and answer as well this one. Do you think climate change will have an impact on painted dog survival in the centuries to come?
I think they're both two very very interesting questions, in terms of an overlap with other species. And certainly, we've gained an enormous amount in these early stages of working with the Peter Lindsay and the Lion Recovery Fund. There are enormous synergies. We do joke together about these damn lions killing our dogs, but the important thing is it's the main. Really, if we're talking about reintroductions, it's really about quality land management. Where you can't reintroduce into wild dogs where there's, and you would never do it. You wouldn't introduce wild dogs into areas. Hello, Pete. No, sorry, you wouldn't reintroduce wild dogs into areas where there's communities aren't ready to accept them. You wouldn't reintroduce wild dogs into areas where there's there's insufficient prey base. So a lot of land management and issues have to actually be sorted out before reintroductions are actually made. And working with other species and other organizations is really quite critical. On the question of climate change, I don't know really. There is a study currently being carried out, but I follow wild dogs, and not just in Zim but around Africa, where they've been seen as in the hottest areas. The Zambezi Valley frequently goes above 150 degrees, and they've also been seen on the top of Kilimanjaro, which is full of snow. So yes, obviously climate change will have an impact, but on these animals. Exactly how, I'm not sure. But one thing I would say about the wild dogs is that they are successful in multiple climates, including very. So that's what I see, as opposed to. That's what I've noticed, as opposed to any scientific study, and perhaps the scientific study that's being carried out by ZSL currently will show us some other results.
Wow. Nick, thank you so much for those answers and for such a presentation. The photos are stunning, and the content has been so enjoyable, informative, and I think there is a lot of food for thought for many of us that have been working in this area, and many that didn't know anything about wild dogs. We've learned so much, And above all, I think it's been such a wonderful honor to have you speak on a subject that Diane really contributed immensely towards. And I want to ask all of us, if you may, please do feel free to make donations to the foundation for the wonderful work that they've been doing. And I think whatever gift you give will go a long way in continuing to push these efforts that Nick and many others are putting. If you can, wherever you're working, please do support this cause. I think it's worthwhile. Nick and Peter and many others that are working in this space would be happy to communicate and exchange ideas. So please feel free to get in touch with him, with many of us in the team, and we'll be happy to make the connections. Once again, Nick, thank you so very much. Wherever you are, if you can access the reactions button, please, if you can give Nick a round of applause. And we're so appreciative of this wonderful presentation that you've made for us, Nick. As always, I often have to ask many of us to just, for one moment, if you can, just turn your camera on so that we can get a picture of all of you. And Holly, thank you so much. Peter, Marilyn, thank you. Sophie, Gloria, Maggie, we so appreciate you coming online. Maggie, that's this ma'am. We so appreciate, and team will take a photo of us in a moment. We really, really appreciate everyone that's turned up, particularly for this one. It's been very special to a lot of us because of the role that Dee had. You know, we just enjoyed. She was a friend, a great listener, and so efficient and really up to the task. So we're so appreciative that you've joined us this afternoon. Tim, how far are you? Done?
Yes, guys, I'm ready to take a screenshot. So I'll just do 3, 2, 1. If you can smile and wave. 3, 2, 1. That looks great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Well, it's left for me to say thank you all for joining us. We will be sending you invitations for our next seminar, but it's been an incredible privilege to have you. And we want to thank Nick for the wonderful presentation. And I know there's so many friends of Diane this afternoon. Thank you for coming along, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much. We will post the seminar on our website. Please feel free to share that with many other friends who knew Dee and would be interested in the work that she was doing. Once again, thank you so much. Bye.